Hey friends, and welcome to Medieval Screen Finds. Tonight, we will explore the profound and lasting impact of a period in English history often defined by conflict, yet equally marked by a remarkable intertwining of peoples, the age of the Danelaw. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Perhaps light an incense or two for that soothing fragrance. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine, if you will, the gentle lapping of waves against a distant shore, carried on a cool breeze. The air is still, save for the whisper of history beckoning. We are not here to recount tales of high drama or frantic battles, though such events were undeniably a part of this unfolding story. Instead, we seek to understand the quiet undercurrents, the subtle shifts in daily life, the slow fusion of customs and tongues that, over generations, sculpted the very bedrock of a nation. This is a story of resilience, adaptation, and the unexpected harmony that can emerge from discord. As you settle into a comfortable repose, let the measured cadence of this narrative guide you through the ancient landscapes of Anglo-Saxon England, revealing the enduring legacy of the Norse presence, a legacy woven into the very fabric of the language you speak, the laws that govern, and perhaps even the silent echoes within the land itself. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and allow the distant echoes of 1,000 years to carry you gently into the quietude of the past. Our journey begins in the late 8th century, a time when the shores of Anglo-Saxon England, though long settled and developing, were about to experience a profound and unsettling transformation. To truly grasp the genesis of the Danelaw, we must first look beyond the immediate horizons of England to the broader canvas of the Viking Age. Picture the rugged coastlines of Scandinavia, where longboats, sleek and formidable, were being crafted by skilled hands. These vessels, iconic symbols of the era, were not merely tools of war but also vehicles of exploration, trade, and ultimately, settlement. The motivations behind this expansive movement were multifaceted, a complex tapestry woven from population growth in their homelands, a yearning for new agricultural lands, and an undeniable desire for the wealth and prestige that could be found in distant, richer territories. Imagine the cold spray on a Viking's face as his longship cut through the waves, propelled by the rhythmic stroke of oars, driven by a blend of necessity and ambition. The initial encounters were stark and terrifying. On a quiet June day in the year 793 AD, the peaceful solitude of Lindisfarne, a revered monastic island off the coast of Northumbria, was shattered. Imagine the tranquility of the monastery, the quiet prayers of the monks, the gentle sea breeze carrying the scent of salt and heather. Then, abruptly, the horrifying sight of dragon-prowed ships appearing on the horizon, followed by the sudden, brutal intrusion of armed warriors. This was not merely an attack. It was a sacrilege, a violation of a holy place, and its reverberations echoed throughout the Christian world. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles, though often sparse, convey a sense of profound shock and terror at this unprovoked act. This event, though devastating for those who endured it, became a grim harbinger, a symbolic beginning of a new, turbulent age for England. In the decades that followed, the nature of these Viking incursions gradually shifted. What began as sporadic, hit-and-run raids, designed to seize easily accessible wealth, silver, treasures, slaves, evolved into something far more organized and ambitious. Imagine small groups of swift longboats, appearing suddenly from the mist, their crews descending upon coastal settlements or vulnerable monasteries, executing their raids with chilling efficiency, and then vanishing as quickly as they appeared. But over time, these isolated attacks gave way to larger, more coordinated campaigns. The scale of the Viking presence grew, with fleets comprising dozens of ships, capable of carrying hundreds of warriors. Their objectives became bolder, moving beyond mere plunder to the establishment of winter camps, then fortified strongholds, and eventually, the systematic subjugation of territories. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of the time, though nominally unified under a loose overlordship, were inherently fragmented. Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex, each with its own kings and internal struggles, struggled to mount a unified defense against this persistent and evolving threat. Imagine the proud but often isolated Anglo-Saxon lords, each focused on their own local power, perhaps initially underestimating the sustained nature of the Viking threat. This disunity proved to be a significant vulnerability. Their responses were often piecemeal, reactive, and ultimately insufficient to stem the tide of increasingly organized Viking aggression. The Anglo-Saxon world, accustomed to internal rivalries, was ill-prepared for an external force that operated with such ruthless efficiency and a shared, if unspoken, objective. A pivotal moment arrived in 865 AD with the arrival of what the Anglo-Saxon chronicles termed the Great Heathen Army. This was not simply another raiding party. It was a formidable, highly organized military force with strategic goals extending far beyond seasonal plunder. Imagine a vast encampment, stretching across the landscape, housing thousands of warriors, their tents and cooking fires dotting the plains. These were seasoned fighters, many of them veterans of campaigns across Frontier and Ireland, led by figures whose names would become synonymous with Viking prowess: Eivor the Boneless, a chieftain of legendary cunning, and Halfdan Ragnarsson, a formidable warrior. Their objective was clear: conquest. They sought not just to take wealth but to establish permanent control over Anglo-Saxon lands. The impact of the Great Heathen Army was swift and devastating. One by one, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms succumbed. Northumbria, in the north, fell first. Its ancient kingdom fractured and its capital, York, transformed into the Viking stronghold of Jorvik. Imagine the once proud halls of Northumbrian kings now echoing with the unfamiliar sounds of Old Norse, and the streets bustling with Viking traders and warriors. East Anglia followed. Its last king, Edmund, famously martyred for his refusal to renounce his Christian faith. Then came Mercia, a powerful kingdom in the heart of England, which also eventually submitted to Viking dominance, though perhaps more through political maneuvering and tribute than direct military subjugation. The sheer scale and sustained nature of this conquest were unprecedented. Vast territories, once firmly Anglo-Saxon, now found themselves under the dominion of Norse rulers, their customs and laws beginning to intermingle with the existing fabric of society. Amidst this relentless expansion, one kingdom steadfastly resisted: Wessex. Here, a figure of remarkable foresight and resilience emerged: Alfred the Great. Imagine a lone king, surrounded by dwindling forces, facing an existential threat to his people and his culture. Alfred's story is one of strategic brilliance and unwavering determination. He understood the need for adaptation. He engaged in periods of strategic retreat, sometimes withdrawing to the marshes of Athelney, allowing him time to regroup and plan. He fortified settlements, organized his FYD, the Anglo-Saxon militia, more effectively, and crucially, learned from his adversaries. His ultimate defiance culminated in the decisive Battle of Edington in 878 AD. Picture the flat, open ground, the Anglo-Saxon shield wall holding firm against the Viking charge, the desperate struggle, and then, the turning tide as Alfred's forces pushed back the invaders. This was a hard-won victory, a testament to Anglo-Saxon tenacity, and it fundamentally altered the course of events. The Battle of Edington forced a confrontation that led to a landmark agreement, the Treaty of Wedmore, also signed in 878 AD. This treaty was not merely a truce. It was a formal demarcation of power and territory, a pragmatic recognition of the new reality. It essentially divided England into two distinct spheres of influence. To the south and west lay Wessex, firmly under Anglo-Saxon control, now a resilient bastion against further Viking encroachment. To the north and east, stretching across vast swathes of the country, was a newly formalized Viking-controlled territory, the Danelaw. Imagine the solemn faces of the Anglo-Saxon and Norse leaders, perhaps in a quiet field, negotiating the boundaries, each side acknowledging the other's strength and recognizing the need for a fragile peace. A crucial, and perhaps surprising, term of the treaty was the baptism of the Viking leader Guthrum. This act, while perhaps politically motivated for Guthrum, held immense symbolic importance for the Anglo-Saxons. It suggested a potential for assimilation, a step towards integrating the formidable Norse presence into the Christian fabric of England, even if only in name at this early stage. The geographical extent of this newly defined Danelaw was significant. Imagine drawing a line across the map of England, roughly from the River Thames northwards to the River Tees. This vast area, encompassing regions like East Anglia, the eastern parts of Mercia, and a substantial portion of Northumbria, now operated under Norse law and custom. It was not a perfectly straight line, of course, but a general demarcation reflecting the areas where Viking control and settlement were most established. This wasn't merely conquered territory, it was an area of profound Viking settlement. Think of farmers tilling the soil, artisans crafting their wares, traders exchanging goods, all speaking Old Norse alongside Old English. These were not just temporary invaders, they were becoming a settled population, establishing families, building homes, and laying down roots in the conquered lands. Despite the formal agreement of the Treaty of Wedmore, the peace that followed was often fragile. Imagine the tension in border communities, the lingering mistrust between Anglo-Saxon and Norse neighbors. Periods of conflict continued, sometimes flaring into open warfare as both sides sought to consolidate their power, expand their influence, or simply secure their borders. Yet, even amidst this uneasy truce and intermittent skirmishes, the seeds of cultural exchange were being sown. The simple act of living side by side, of conducting trade, of occasional intermarriage, inevitably led to early interactions. Imagine the subtle blending of words in the marketplace, the exchange of tools or farming techniques, the quiet observation of different customs. These early interactions, however tentative, were the very first threads in a complex tapestry that would, over centuries, weave together two distinct cultures into something new and enduring. The Danelaw was born not just from blood and conquest, but from the beginnings of a complicated, often reluctant, and ultimately transformative coexistence. As the initial dust of conquest settled, a fascinating new reality began to take shape within the territories of the Danelaw. This was not simply a land under foreign occupation, but a region where Viking legal, social, and political structures started to interact with, adapt, and sometimes even supersede existing Anglo-Saxon customs. Imagine a landscape where two distinct currents, one flowing from the Anglo-Saxon past and another from the Norse present, began to converge and intertwine, creating a unique eddy of shared Anglo-Norse influence that profoundly shaped daily existence. At the heart of the new governance lay the Viking leaders and jarls. These formidable figures, often seasoned warriors and commanders, established their authority in the conquered lands, effectively replacing the former Anglo-Saxon aristocracy. Imagine a proud Anglo-Saxon Finn, accustomed to his ancestral lands and influence, now navigating a world where Norse Jarl held sway, their power resting on conquest and the loyalty of their retinues. The familiar Anglo-Saxon hierarchy, based on bloodline and allegiance to the West Saxon king, now faced a parallel structure rooted in Norse warrior traditions and a more direct, often personal, form of leadership. Yet, this replacement wasn't always a complete upheaval. Interestingly, many existing Anglo-Saxon administrative units, such as the shires and hundreds, were often retained, though adapted to suit the new Norse rule. Imagine the subtle changes in the way these familiar administrative divisions functioned under their new masters. However, the Vikings also introduced their own distinctive administrative units. The most notable of these was the wapentake. Picture a gathering of armed men, perhaps at a crossroads or a natural landmark, each indicating their assent to a new law or decree by the clashing of their weapons, a symbolic act that gave the wapentake its name. This Norse innovation replaced the Anglo-Saxon hundreds in many areas, particularly in the core Viking settlements, becoming a characteristic feature of the Danelaw's administrative landscape. This blending of old and new administrative structures reflects the pragmatic approach of the Norse settlers, who often adapted what worked while also embedding their own distinct practices. When it came to law and justice, the Danelaw became a fascinating laboratory of legal fusion. Imagine the challenges of applying two distinct legal traditions within the same communities. The established Anglo-Saxon common law, with its emphasis on local custom and royal decrees, began to intertwine with Norse legal traditions. The concept of oath-swearing and compurgation, where an accused person could clear their name by gathering a certain number of oath helpers who swore to their innocence, was prevalent in both systems. This shared legal mechanism likely facilitated some degree of continuity and understanding, even as the specific nuances of each legal code differed. The Danelaw's legal system would become one of its most distinctive and enduring legacies, characterized by features that set it apart from purely Anglo-Saxon areas. The defining feature of the Danelaw's legal distinctiveness was its strong emphasis on monetary compensation for offenses, a concept known as wergild. Imagine a society where every individual, from the highest-ranking Jarl to the lowliest thrall, had a fixed monetary value assigned to them based on their social status. When an injury or death occurred, instead of resorting to the escalating cycle of blood feuds, a payment of wergild was made to the victim or their family. This system, detailed and elaborate, served to reduce the pervasive cycle of vengeance that often characterized early medieval societies. It represented a pragmatic and, in some ways, more ordered approach to justice, where financial restitution sought to heal societal wounds rather than perpetuate them. This focus on monetary compensation, alongside detailed property laws and a somewhat more egalitarian approach to land ownership in certain areas, contrasted notably with some Anglo-Saxon legal customs. Furthermore, the legal landscape of the Danelaw was marked by the importance of local assemblies, known as things. Imagine a public gathering, perhaps on a natural mound or a specially designated clearing, where disputes were resolved, grievances aired, and laws proclaimed by the community. These thing assemblies were central to Norse law, providing a forum for direct participation in justice and governance, a concept that, while not entirely absent in Anglo-Saxon shire courts, had a particularly strong emphasis and character within the Danelaw. This communal aspect of legal practice fostered a sense of shared responsibility for justice, even amidst the presence of powerful jarls. The very landscape of the Danelaw underwent a significant transformation with the arrival of Viking settlers. This was not simply a military occupation, but a migration of people, farmers, artisans, and traders, who established new communities, often settling alongside existing Anglo-Saxon ones. Imagine new longhouses appearing next to Anglo-Saxon halls, their smoke mingling in the air, signifying a gradual, tangible shift in the demographic makeup of the land. Urban centers, in particular, witnessed remarkable growth and transformation, becoming important Anglo-Norse hubs. York, once the Roman city of Eboracum and later the Anglo-Saxon capital of Northumbria, flourished as Jorvik, a bustling Viking stronghold and commercial powerhouse. Imagine the vibrant activity within Jorvik's walls, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of merchants speaking both Old English and Old Norse, the rich scent of trade goods from distant lands filling the air. Other towns like Lincoln, Norwich, and Cambridge also experienced significant development, becoming vital arteries in a burgeoning Anglo-Norse economy. These urban centers were melting pots of culture and commerce, where the intermingling of peoples was most visible. Even in rural life, where agricultural practices largely continued as before, subtle Norse influences began to appear, particularly in aspects of land tenure and farming techniques. Imagine a farmer tilling his field, perhaps using tools or methods slightly different from his Anglo-Saxon neighbor, reflecting the diverse agricultural traditions brought by the new settlers. The rhythm of rural life, dependent on the seasons and the land, remained a constant struggle. Yet within that struggle, new methods and ideas quietly took root. The economy of the Danelaw experienced a significant revival, largely due to the Vikings' role as prolific traders. Imagine the bustling wharves of Jorvik or Lincoln, laden with goods destined for faraway shores. The Norse were not just raiders. They were astute merchants, opening up new and extensive trade routes with Scandinavia, the Baltic, and even further afield. Key goods flowed through these networks, fares from the northern forests, valuable timber, and even slaves, tragically, alongside precious silver and other commodities. This extensive network of commerce brought wealth and new connections to the Danelaw, integrating it into a broader European trading system. The minting of coins, often independently by Viking rulers, further underscored the economic autonomy and vitality of these regions, reflecting their integration into wider trading networks. Imagine the glint of newly minted silver coins, bearing the names of Norse kings, circulating alongside Anglo-Saxon pennies, a tangible sign of a burgeoning, blended economy. Social structures within the Danelaw also presented a fascinating picture of blending and adaptation. The Anglo-Saxon noble class, the Thegns, found themselves interacting, sometimes clashing, sometimes intermarrying, with a new Viking aristocracy. Imagine a formal feast where Anglo-Saxon Thegns and Viking jarls sat at the same table, navigating the complex etiquette of a new social order. There was even the potential for a degree of social mobility under Norse rule, perhaps more so than in some rigid Anglo-Saxon structures, as success in trade or warfare could elevate one's standing. The common free Anglo-Saxon peasant, known as the chel, continued their arduous daily lives, their existence largely governed by the rhythms of the land. Slavery, or the presence of thralls, existed in both Anglo-Saxon and Norse societies, a grim reality of the age, though its extent and precise nature varied. This shared unfortunate institution, though tragic, perhaps created a strange, dark commonality between the two cultures. The initial stages of religious coexistence were, as one might expect, complex and often challenging. Imagine Christian communities, their churches scarred by past raids, now living alongside pagan Norse settlers who worshipped their own pantheon of gods. Before the widespread Christianization of the Vikings, there were undoubtedly compromises and tensions, with Christian and pagan communities navigating how to live side by side. The sound of church bells might have mingled with the distant echoes of pagan rituals, creating a unique, somewhat uneasy soundscape across the Danelaw. This early period of religious interaction laid the groundwork for the deeper cultural synthesis that would follow. The spiritual landscape of the Danelaw was a dynamic and often turbulent confluence of belief systems. The arrival of the Vikings brought not only new political structures and legal customs, but also a stark confrontation between established Anglo-Saxon Christianity and the pagan Norse beliefs. Imagine the profound shock and fear that rippled through Anglo-Saxon communities when Viking raiders attacked and desecrated monasteries and churches, places considered sacred sanctuaries. These acts were seen not merely as destruction but as sacrilege, a direct assault on their most fundamental spiritual foundations, the very symbols of their faith. Crosses, relics, holy books, were vulnerable to the brutal efficiency of the pagan invaders. Despite this initial devastation and the pervasive fear, Anglo-Saxon Christian institutions displayed remarkable resilience. Imagine monastic communities, though perhaps reduced in number or forced to relocate, stubbornly persisting, maintaining their practices and beliefs even in the shadow of Viking overlordship. Churches, though some were undoubtedly destroyed, often remained, adapting to the presence of their new Norse neighbors. This persistence was crucial, as it provided a bedrock of continuity for the Anglo-Saxon population and a visible presence of the Christian faith within the newly formed Danelaw. While conflict was undeniably present, there is also intriguing evidence of a degree of religious tolerance or syncretism in the early Danelaw, particularly in everyday interactions. Imagine a quiet village where Christian Anglo-Saxons and pagan Norse settlers lived in close proximity, perhaps even sharing market spaces or communal resources. This isn't to say there was universal harmony, but rather a pragmatic coexistence born out of necessity, where direct confrontation over faith might have been less common in the daily grind of life than it was during large-scale raids. Perhaps a shared respect for certain natural forces or common understanding of agricultural cycles created unspoken common ground. The eventual conversion of the Vikings was a gradual and multifaceted process. Political conversions often played a strategic role in the early stages. Recall Guthrum's baptism as part of the Treaty of Wedmore. Imagine this solemn ceremony, perhaps observed with a mixture of hope and skepticism by both Anglo-Saxons and Norse alike. Such conversions, while potentially politically motivated for the Viking leaders, were strategically important for establishing peace treaties and fostering a semblance of stability between the two peoples. They signaled a willingness, at least on the surface, to integrate into the Christian Anglo-Saxon world. However, the more profound and lasting Christianization of the Viking settlers was a slower, more organic process. Imagine the quiet influence of intermarriage, where Christian Anglo-Saxon women might have brought their faith into Norse households, or the subtle persuasion of trade, where interactions with Christian merchants and communities exposed the Norse to new ideas and beliefs. The appeal of the established church, with its organized structure, moral framework, and promise of salvation, gradually gained traction among the settlers. Missionaries and the resilient monastic communities played a crucial role in this ongoing conversion, patiently working to spread Christian teachings among the Norse population. Imagine a lone monk, bravely venturing into a Norse settlement, patiently explaining the tenets of his faith, slowly chipping away at centuries of pagan tradition. One of the most profound and lasting legacies of the Danelaw is etched into the very fabric of the English language. The interaction between Old Norse and Old English was a linguistic crucible, leading to a massive influx of Old Norse words into the English lexicon. Imagine the sounds of two languages mingling in the marketplace, in homes, and in the fields, words gradually borrowing from one another, adapting, and evolving. You speak these words every day, often without realizing their ancient Norse origins. Consider words like sky, leg, skin, window, egg, anger, gift, happy, take, call, ill, ugly, weak, husband, and law, all derive from Old Norse. This linguistic legacy is a constant, subtle reminder of the deep intermingling that occurred beyond individual words. The interaction between the two languages may have also contributed to the simplification of English grammar. Imagine the complexities of Old English inflections, the endings of words that indicated grammatical relationships, slowly eroding as speakers of both languages sought a simpler means of communication. While not solely attributable to Norse influence, it is widely believed that this linguistic contact played a significant role in streamlining English grammar, leading to the more analytical language we speak today. The enduring legacy is also strikingly visible in place names across the former Danelaw. Imagine looking at a map of northern and eastern England and seeing countless towns and villages with endings like by meaning farm or settlement, as in Grimsby or Derby, Thorpe meaning hamlet, as in Scunthorpe, Thwaite meaning clearing, as in Satterthwaite, or Keld meaning spring, as in Starbottenbeck. These place names are linguistic fossils, silent witnesses to the Norse settlement and presence centuries ago. In the realm of artistic and material culture, a fascinating blend of Anglo-Saxon and Norse styles emerged. Imagine skilled artisans, perhaps working side by side, subtly incorporating elements from both traditions into their creations. This fusion is particularly evident in metalwork, where intricate Anglo-Saxon patterns might intertwine with Norse animal motifs, and in sculpture, especially in the distinctive hogback stones and crush shafts found in former Danelaw regions. These stone carvings often depict a unique blend of Christian iconography and Norse mythological elements, a visual representation of the cultural synthesis. Coinage, too, reflected this blending, with Anglo-Norse rulers often minting coins that combined elements of both Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian artistic traditions. Archaeological excavations in England have also uncovered a wealth of distinct Norse material culture, tools, weapons, jewelry, existing alongside Anglo-Saxon artifacts, providing tangible evidence of their coexistence. While direct architectural influence was limited, there is some evidence of reused Viking stones in later buildings or specific building techniques that might show Norse inspiration. The most profound blending, however, occurred on a social and customary level. Intermarriage between Anglo-Saxons and Norse settlers became a common practice. Imagine families where parents spoke different languages, where children grew up with tales from both Anglo-Saxon heroic sagas and Norse myths. This widespread intermarriage led to integrated families and communities, blurring the lines between the two formerly distinct ethnic groups. Gradually, certain customs, personal names, and even styles of personal appearance began to be adopted across ethnic lines. Think of the adoption of Norse names like Thursday Tan Orm by Anglo-Saxons, or the Anglo-Saxons embracing aspects of Norse dress or ornamentation. This complex process of cultural blending, far from creating two separate societies, actually contributed significantly to the eventual formation of a more unified English identity. Imagine a shared sense of belonging slowly emerging, distinct from purely continental Germanic or purely Norse identities. The challenges faced together, the shared daily lives, and the mutual influences gradually forged a new cultural amalgam. The Danelaw was not merely a battleground but a crucible where a new sense of Englishness was being forged. The legacy of the Danelaw also left an indelible mark on law and society that extended far beyond its political boundaries. Even after Anglo-Saxon reconquest, the term Danelaw continued to be recognized as a distinct legal concept, describing the unique legal practices that persisted in these former Viking-controlled regions for centuries. Imagine a legal dispute in medieval England, where the application of law might differ depending on whether the land in question had once been part of the Danelaw. This enduring recognition highlights the depth of the Norse legal imprint. Furthermore, the subtle but significant impact of Norse legal principles on the development of later English common law cannot be overstated. Concepts like wergild, public assemblies akin to the Norse thing evolving into local courts, and rudimentary juror-like elements may have subtly influenced the evolution of English legal practices, laying foundations for legal structures that would endure for centuries. The Danelaw, therefore, was not merely a historical footnote but a fundamental chapter in the ongoing story of English identity and its unique cultural mosaic. While the Danelaw represented a period of unique cultural fusion and political distinctiveness, its existence as a separate entity was always poised on a delicate balance. The Anglo-Saxon kings, particularly those from the resilient Kingdom of Wessex, harbored an unwavering ambition: the reconquest of the territories lost to the Vikings and the unification of all England under a single crown. Imagine the strategic minds at work in the West Saxon court, patiently planning, slowly gathering strength, always with the ultimate goal of reclaiming their ancestral lands. This chapter traces that determined process, examining the strategies employed, the key figures who led the charge, and the shifting balance of power that would ultimately lead to a unified England. The resurgence of Wessex began almost immediately after Alfred the Great's death, championed by his astute successor, Edward the Elder. Edward embarked on systematic campaigns to reclaim territories from the Vikings, not through single, dramatic battles, but through a methodical, almost relentless advance. Imagine a military campaign conducted with the precision of a chess game, each move carefully considered. A key strategy was the construction of fortified settlements, known as bayers, as he advanced. These bays served as strongholds, bases for further operations, and safe havens for local populations, gradually extending Anglo-Saxon control and influence into formerly Norse-held lands. The rhythmic sound of hammers and saws, the careful laying of stone, and the constant watchfulness of guards would have characterized these expanding frontiers. Crucially, Edward did not fight alone. His sister, the formidable Ethelflaed, Lady of the Mercians, played an equally pivotal role in this reconquest. Imagine a woman of exceptional leadership and strategic acumen, commanding armies, fortifying towns, and expanding Mercian influence. She was a military leader and strategist in her own right, working in close concert with her brother, their efforts forming a powerful, coordinated front against the Viking presence. Their joint campaigns were characterized by these coordinated efforts, fortifying strategic locations and gradually pushing back Viking control. The combined might and synchronized movements of Edward's West Saxon forces and Ethelflaed's Mercian armies presented a united and increasingly irresistible force against the often fragmented Viking leadership. The reconquest unfolded through a series of key campaigns and hard-fought victories. Imagine the intensity of sieges, the desperate clashes on open battlefields, as the Anglo-Saxons systematically targeted and reclaimed territories. The reconquest of East Anglia and Mercia was particularly significant, involving major battles and sieges that led to the reabsorption of these former Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into the burgeoning English realm. As Anglo-Saxon power grew, the remaining Viking rulers in various areas were increasingly forced into submission, often by oath-taking, a formal acknowledgement of Anglo-Saxon overlordship. This was not always a bloody eradication but a strategic absorption, with the defeated Norse leaders often retaining some local authority under the Anglo-Saxon crown. The culmination of this unification drive came under Athelstan, Edward the Elder's son. Imagine a king with a grand vision, who aimed not just to reclaim lost lands but to forge a single, unified kingdom. Athelstan famously achieved the title of King of all Britain or King of the English, marking a profound and significant step towards national unity. His reign is often seen as the true birth of a unified England. The pinnacle of his military achievements, and a pivotal moment in English history, was the Battle of Brunanburh in 937 AD. Picture a massive, brutal clash of armies, where Athelstan decisively defeated a formidable coalition of Norse, Scottish, and Strathclyde forces. This was a battle for the very soul of England, and Athelstan's victory secured Anglo-Saxon dominance, firmly establishing his authority over the entire island. Brunanburh held immense symbolic importance for nascent English identity, solidifying the idea of a single English kingdom, a concept that had long been elusive. Despite the successful reconquest and the establishment of a unified English kingdom, the narrative of the Danelaw does not end abruptly. The late 10th and early 11th centuries witnessed what is often referred to as the Second Viking Age. Imagine renewed waves of Viking raids, not seeking permanent settlement this time, but targeting the wealth of the now unified Anglo-Saxon kingdom. These renewed incursions eventually led to the remarkable reign of Knut the Great, a Dane who, through conquest and political acumen, came to rule a vast North Sea empire that included a unified England, Denmark, and Norway. While Knut was undeniably a Dane, his rule in England is often viewed as a period of stability that, paradoxically, further integrated the former Danelaw regions into a broader English identity. He largely respected English law and institutions, governing through existing administrative structures, thereby reinforcing the sense of a cohesive English realm, even under foreign dominion. The gradual dissolution of the Danelaw's distinct political identity was therefore a process of assimilation rather than eradication. It is crucial to understand that the Anglo-Saxon reconquest was not about expelling the Norse population. Rather, it was about integrating them into a unified English kingdom. Imagine families with mixed Anglo-Norse heritage now finding themselves subjects of a single English king, their loyalties gradually shifting and broadening. While politically unified, the legal and social customs of the former Danelaw regions often retained their distinct characteristics for centuries, a testament to the deep roots of Norse influence. These localized differences in law and custom remained a recognizable feature of the English landscape for generations. Ultimately, the common struggle against, and eventual absorption of, the Norse presence contributed significantly to a stronger sense of Englishness that transcended the former boundaries of individual kingdoms. Imagine a collective memory of shared hardship and eventual triumph, forging a common bond among disparate peoples. The role of the Church was also vital in this process of unification. The re-establishment of unified ecclesiastical control across the former Danelaw regions fostered both religious and cultural cohesion. The Church provided moral and ideological support for the idea of a single Christian English kingdom, promoting unity under God and King, thereby cementing the spiritual and cultural integration of the diverse populations within England's newly defined borders. The political end of the Danelaw was not an erasure, but a transformation, allowing its unique legacy to continue shaping the emergent English nation. Even as the political boundaries of the Danelaw faded into a unified English kingdom, the profound impact of the Norse presence continued to resonate, leaving indelible marks on the landscape, the language, and even the very genetic makeup of the people. Imagine the silent echoes of an ancient past, manifesting in the place names that dot the map, the subtle variations in accent, and the buried secrets revealed by the archaeologist's spade. This chapter delves into these lasting legacies, exploring how the Danelaw period, far from being a mere historical interlude, was a fundamental crucible in shaping the unique identity and cultural mosaic of England. One of the most immediate and tangible legacies of the Danelaw is etched into the very ground beneath our feet, particularly in the landscape of northern and eastern England. Imagine walking through a rural area in Yorkshire or Lincolnshire and encountering village names that speak volumes of their Viking origins. The suffix "by," meaning farm or settlement, is perhaps the most ubiquitous and iconic example. Think of places like Grimsby, Derby, Whitby, and Selby, each name a linguistic fossil, a direct testament to a Norse settlement established perhaps 1,000 years ago. These are not merely arbitrary labels. They are historical markers, each by signifying a point where a Norse family or group put down roots, cleared land, and began a new life. Beyond, a rich tapestry of other Norse place name elements paints a detailed picture of the everyday activities and natural features that shape these communities. Picture a small clearing in the woods, a thorp, meaning hamlet or outlying farm, like Scunthorpe or Althorpe, indicating a smaller, perhaps newer, settlement. Picture a place where a natural spring bubbled up, a keld meaning spring, or a patch of cultivated land, a toft meaning homestead or curtilage. The presence of thwaite, meaning clearing or meadow in names like Satterthwaite or Crustthwaite speaks of the arduous work of transforming wild landscapes into arable land. These place names are not just historical curiosities. They reflect a practical, lived experience, highlighting the agricultural focus of many Norse settlers and their intimate relationship with the land they cultivated. The influence of the Danelaw extends far beyond mere nomenclature, subtly shaping the very agricultural practices and patterns of land use that endured for centuries. Imagine a farmer in the former Danelaw, perhaps employing a system of land division or a particular method of crop rotation that subtly differs from practices in the Anglo-Saxon West. While the fundamental Anglo-Saxon open-field system persisted in many areas, certain Norse innovations or preferences, particularly regarding smaller, more individualized landholdings in some regions, may have subtly influenced local agricultural practices. The more extensive use of certain types of livestock or specific crop varieties could also have been introduced or emphasized by Norse settlers, leaving a quiet, lasting impression on the rural economy. Beyond the visible landscape, the Danelaw's legacy is profoundly audible in the spoken language. While we have already explored the massive influx of Old Norse vocabulary into English, the influence extended to dialectal variations that persist to this day. Imagine listening to someone from Yorkshire or Lincolnshire and noticing certain pronunciations or grammatical structures that sound subtly different from dialects further south. The dialects of northern and eastern England, particularly those in the heart of the former Danelaw, retain a greater proportion of Norse-derived vocabulary and grammatical features compared to dialects in the south. These subtle linguistic characteristics are not merely regional quirks. They are living testaments to the prolonged and intensive linguistic contact between Old English and Old Norse speakers, a quiet, almost unconscious reminder of the cultural blending that occurred 1,000 years ago. The artistic and material culture of the Danelaw offers compelling visual evidence of this cultural synthesis. Imagine the intricate carvings on a stone cross, where Christian biblical scenes blend seamlessly with zoomorphic designs characteristic of Norse art. The Gosforth Cross in Cumbria, for instance, is a remarkable example, depicting both Christian figures and scenes from Norse mythology, such as Ragnarok, the Viking apocalypse. This syncretism in stone, often erected at religious sites, reflects the complex interplay between pagan traditions and the newly adopted Christian faith. Similarly, the unique hogback stones, found predominantly in the Danelaw, a carved stone monument shaped like houses or sarcophagi, often decorated with a blend of Anglo-Saxon and Norse artistic styles. These are tangible, enduring symbols of a period when two distinct artistic traditions converged to create something entirely new and expressive. Archaeological discoveries continue to unearth a wealth of artifacts that illustrate the daily lives and cultural practices of the Anglo-Norse population. Imagine the careful excavation of a Viking-age settlement in York, revealing not only Norse tools, weapons, and jewelry but also domestic items that speak of a shared existence with Anglo-Saxons. From pottery styles to burial practices, the archaeological record provides concrete evidence of cultural exchange and adaptation. Even the reuse of Viking stones in later Anglo-Saxon or Norman buildings in former Danelaw areas hints at a practical legacy, where the remnants of the Norse presence were integrated into the evolving architectural landscape. Perhaps one of the most compelling and often surprising legacies of the Danelaw is the genetic footprint left by the Norse settlers. Imagine scientists today analyzing DNA samples from populations across England, uncovering patterns that reflect ancient migrations and intermarriages. Modern genetic studies have provided compelling evidence of a significant Norse genetic contribution to the populations of the former Danelaw regions. This genetic legacy, often more pronounced in these areas compared to parts of England untouched by the Danelaw, confirms what historical and linguistic evidence has long suggested. The Viking presence was not merely one of transient raiders, but of substantial settlement and widespread intermarriage with the existing Anglo-Saxon population. This indicates a deep and intimate blending of peoples, a merging of bloodlines that continues to shape the genetic landscape of modern Britain. These regional genetic differences serve as silent, biological markers of a transformative historical period, reminding us that the echoes of the Danelaw are not just in the earth, but within the very people who inhabit the land. As the gentle currents of history bring us to the close of our journey, we arrive at a deeper understanding of the Danelaw's profound and often underestimated role in shaping the very essence of English identity. Far from being a mere footnote of conquest and conflict, this period was a crucial crucible where disparate cultures blended, leaving an indelible mark that resonates even in the modern world. Imagine a grand tapestry, initially woven with distinct Anglo-Saxon and Norse threads, which, over centuries, became so intricately intertwined that discerning the original strands became almost impossible, creating a fabric of unique strength and character. The narrative of Englishness itself was irrevocably altered by the Danelaw. Before the Viking incursions, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, despite shared linguistic and cultural roots, were often focused on regional identities: Northumbrian, Mercian, West Saxon. The threat of the Great Heathen Army, however, acted as a powerful catalyst for a nascent sense of collective identity. Imagine the Anglo-Saxon people, faced with a common, formidable external enemy, beginning to perceive themselves less as isolated kingdom dwellers and more as part of a larger, shared Anglo-Saxon cultural and religious sphere. The eventual reconquest, under kings like Alfred, Edward the Elder, and Athelstan, transformed this defensive solidarity into a more assertive, unified English identity. The Danelaw, therefore, ironically facilitated the very political and cultural unity that ultimately absorbed it. The shared experience of invasion, resistance, and then gradual integration forged a stronger, more resilient national consciousness than might have developed otherwise. The enduring economic vitality of the former Danelaw regions, particularly its urban centers, is another significant legacy. Imagine the bustling markets of York or Lincoln today, their streets still humming with commercial activity, echoing the vibrant trade networks established during the Viking Age. While the political control shifted back to Anglo-Saxon hands, the economic infrastructure and trade connections fostered by the Norse settlers continued to flourish. Jorvik, the Viking name for York, became a major hub in a vast North Sea trading network, connecting England with Scandinavia, the Baltic, and even further east. This commercial dynamism, once established, largely continued, ensuring that these former Danelaw towns remained significant economic powerhouses in the medieval English landscape. The mercantile spirit of the Norse settlers, their expertise in long-distance trade, infused these regions with a commercial vibrancy that contributed significantly to England's overall economic development. In the quiet corners of rural life, the agricultural practices introduced or emphasized by the Norse also left subtle, lasting impressions. While the fundamental Anglo-Saxon open-field system persisted, there is evidence that the Norse influence contributed to certain localized agricultural differences, such as preferences for particular farming techniques, specific livestock breeds, or even a greater emphasis on certain crops. Imagine a farmer in a Danelaw village, silently employing a method of plowing or a system of crop rotation passed down through generations, perhaps unwittingly following a tradition with Norse roots. These subtle adaptations in land use and food production became woven into the fabric of regional life, contributing to the distinct character of farming communities in the East and North. Beyond the tangible, the Danelaw period may have subtly influenced English folklore and storytelling. Imagine the shared hearths where tales were spun, where Anglo-Saxon legends mingled with Norse myths. While it is difficult to precisely trace direct influences, the long period of coexistence and intermarriage undoubtedly led to an exchange of stories, heroic sagas, and even mythological figures. Certain regional variations in folklore, or the presence of specific mythological creatures or themes, might owe a debt to the Norse presence, their stories subtly absorbed into the rich tapestry of English popular culture. This cultural osmosis, often occurring below the radar of official histories, added another layer of depth and complexity to the collective imagination. In our modern consciousness, the Vikings and the Danelaw have often been subject to both romanticization and demonization. Imagine the popular images of horned helmets and brutal raids that often dominate historical narratives. Early Anglo-Saxon chroniclers, traumatized by the initial devastation, often painted a picture of unbridled pagan savagery. Later, in the Victorian era, the Vikings were sometimes romanticized as rugged, adventurous seafarers. However, a more nuanced understanding, informed by archaeological discoveries, linguistic analysis, and genetic studies, reveals a far more complex reality. The Vikings were not just raiders but also traders, farmers, and skilled artisans, who contributed significantly to the development of the lands they settled. The Danelaw, therefore, stands as a testament to the fact that history is rarely black and white, but a rich mosaic of conflict, cooperation, and profound cultural exchange. As we conclude our meditative journey through the Danelaw, we are left with a profound appreciation for its transformative power. It was a period of intense struggle and profound change. Yet from the clash of cultures emerged a stronger, more complex, and ultimately more vibrant English identity. The echoes of the Danelaw are not confined to dusty history books or archaeological sites. They are present in the words we speak, the names of our towns, and even in the subtle genetic makeup of the people. Now, as the stories of ancient kings and warriors, of bustling markets and quiet farms, begin to recede, let the gentle rhythm of the past guide you deeper into repose. The struggles and triumphs of these distant ancestors, the intricate weaving of their lives, have all played a part in shaping the world you inhabit. As you drift into the quietude of the night, know that the legacy of blood and bargains, the enduring spirit of the Danelaw, continues to flow through the heart of England, a testament to the remarkable capacity of human cultures to adapt, to intertwine, and to create something new and enduring from the currents of history. Close your eyes, Breathe deeply and allow the peaceful silence to enfold you, carrying you gently into dreams.